Thank you so much, Maureen, for inviting me today and for giving me this opportunity to speak to you. My name is Kendi. I am a co-organizer for Flutter Kenya, Android 254 and Android Con KE. State management in Flutter, and also I'm going to touch a bit about the MVVM design in Provider. Um, our topics today are going to be like I'm going to introduce to you like what management is, types of state management, a little bit introduction in Provider, classes used in Provider, also come to talk about design patterns, also the MVVM design patterns, what we're going to be talking about, and also lastly we discuss patterns. So without further ado, let me dig in. So what is state management? um this is probably like one of those things that most Flutter developers are always intrigued to know. Like you find people want to know like, hey, which state management is am I supposed to go and use, which state management is best for this type of an application. And I feel like this is more the commonly asked question a lot in Flutter. But you know, it depends on your application. That's how you choose your state management. So in Flutter, however, I'd say like state management is a combination of the architecture and low-key somehow dependency injection where data changes over the life cycle of an application, making the UI to react the expected outputs. And so we have a couple of state managements. I'm not going to talk about these state managements, but I'll just, you know, just highlight them. We have the local state that is used. That is a state that is used to hold on data after rendering a widget, and here is where we mostly talk about the set state, like the initial application when you run your first application, you the Flutter app, the counter application. This is where the set state is there. So it's up to you as you continue building your application, depending on the complexity of your application. This is where you now come to decide which state management you're going to have. Like for instance, in inherited widget, Redux, scope model, Flutter block, and provider. So today we are going to dig deeper on provider. Whenever you're free, please go check these types of state management so that you can know which one you suits you the best. Today I'm going to touch about provider because I feel like provider is more beginner friendly. Uh-huh. So according to Chris Sales, the product manager of Flutter, he says that this is the recommended way to manage state for apps of all sizes. Uh-huh. And provider is a mixture between dependency injection and state management built with widgets for widgets according to the Flutter the Flutter provider package. This is what they say. And for me, I feel like it's like a way of using inherited inherited widget. Um, for instance, you know, inherited widget is where you like find a child is inheriting something from the parent, where the parent is inheriting something from the parent. You see, like you have this widget tree where you're inheriting things from your parents. Okay, and this allows the child to access any data from the parent, in other words. And with provider, you're gonna have to like use so many classes, for you to like achieve what you want. You have like things like change notifier, consumer stream providers, and I feel like at this point this is like already daunting. You're like confused, like, so how do I go about and Literally, this is like the representation of how you feel. Like, which one do I go with? Like, am I going to get the correct thing or not? But don't worry. Let me try to break it down into three into three into three tasks that you're easy to understand. So, assuming you're having an emergency, okay? You're having an emergency and you have like three options or three things to do. First of all, let's say you're having an emergency initially. You sound an alarm, like you try to call people and you notify people or your neighbors that something has changed from the norm. That is, tags are coming in into your house. Then the second thing is you're not going to just sound an alarm and just sit down there. You're gonna try to escape. So by this you like find an alternative route, exit way. That is, you provide access for yourself to move from this danger that you're facing. And then the third one is you try to seek help. Like maybe you want these people arrested. So the consumers, the people that had your alarm or you sounded the alarm to, are the consumers of your alarm, therefore come to your rescue. These guys are coming to provide security for you. So if they're arrested, they won't be, they are not going to come again, hopefully. So with these things, I hope this explains it. So like, first of all, you need a provider to provide access to whatever you want, and then you have consumers. And then you have consumers, and consumers are like three classes, three major classes. And I hope you feel like more relaxed. You're like, okay, now that I'm understanding how to use these notifiers, let me know how to use this provider. Let me know how to go about with providers. Um, as I said, the first thing is the notifier. So the notifier these are classes to notify the provider that something has changed. For example, we have like two very common ones. One is the
Hey,
notifiers.
Kendi.
They notify any change in the model. And yes, please, audible
You
still.
are a little bit you are a little bit breaking. I think maybe it's your internet connection,
Oh,
but we can hear you. So, guys, if you can't hear or if you have anything, you can just put it on the chat. So, go ahead, Kendi.
okay. Am I still audible?
Yeah, you are.
Can you guys hear me?
Yes, we can. Continue.
Can you hear me, Maureen?
Yes, I can.
Yes, I can hear you. Continue. I hope. Oh, thank you so much, Sigu. All right. So, as I was talking about the change notifiers. So, they notify any change in the model or the object as it tracks the object down the widget tree. So, and they also use a function called the notify listeners. So here they notify of changes to the UI so that it can update itself to the latest changes. And we as I've said, it notifies any change in the model. So here, when I talk about the model, I'm going to explain more about the model when we go to the MVVM structure. And then next we have the value notifier. So this is a change notifier. It's very related to change notifier that holds a single value. So when this value is changed with something that's not in the old value as evaluated by the equality operator, this class therefore notifies the listeners that something has changed. So a simple example is if you have a simple value like a string or integer, you just wrap them in a value notifier which manages the value state and notifies the listeners that something has changed. All right, I hope that was a little bit clear. So let's move to this structure. This is let's move to this structure where we try to explain like how um, the listeners goes. So here we have a widget, and this widget, this the yellow widget here, is uh, is acting as the ancestor widget, and we have like a producer and then listeners. So um, this technique of so what, ideally what we're trying to do here is we want to like have these listeners, when an activity is happening, when state is changing, we want like the listeners to listen to whatever is happening on the on the widget. So we have a producer here. This producer, it can emit some events and change some internal app state, you know. And then we use this technique ideally is called the lifting state app, where you use a stateful widget as the first common ancestor. The widget that's in yellow, that is the first common ancestor of all these widgets. And then we can propagate the state change from this widget all the way up to the common ancestor. And this is where now we use the call the set state rather. This is where we use the set state. But I feel like this is not the best approach because with lifting state there are so many you're going to have to encounter some problems because number one, it has too many boilerplates, too many boilerplates code, and also has too many unnecessary rebuilds. For instance, when a listener is called, uh, everything rebuilds from this ancestor, the widget that is the ancestor widget. Everything rebuilds that is connected in this widget. So this is not the necessary one. Everything rebuilds. For example, when a widget rebuilds, all its descendants rebuild as well. So I don't feel like this is the right, especially when your app is growing. However, though, let's consider adding a provider in in here, to see how everything. To let's consider adding a provider as our common ancestor. So here, the producer. Sorry, let me hide this. So here, the producer can find the provider that it needs and updates the state. You see, like it doesn't have to use like to go through all these widget, to go up through the widget tree for it to get to the provider. It can literally use the provider that it needs and update the state without updating in all other widgets. The listener can register, they can register themselves for updates so that they can rebuild when the state changes. Here, the provider here acts as a common ancestor to all the widgets in the substring so that any widget can get access to the provider, but only the widgets that are registered as the listeners will rebuild when the state changes. So you have to register your widget as a listener so that it can rebuild whenever the state changes. Aha, and then we move to consumers. So consumers here, this is a widget inside of the provider that is used to register itself as a listener. So as I was saying here, so to to use the listener, it has to be registered. For a widget to rebuild, it has to be registered as a listener. And here, the listeners here is where the consumers come in. Okay. And it uses the syntax provider.auth type syntax. So when you want to access a value that is a, so this is how it works. It works like when you want to access a value that is available by the provider. Also, it retrieves the value and object that you ask for, and also it registers the current widget as a listener, where the widget identifies itself as the context. Aha, I hope so far you guys are understanding. And so the next topic, we are moving to the design patterns. This so does your state, like so many things are playing are going on. So to avoid your state with the UI and end up with some messy codes, which is very difficult to update and maintain. This is where we introduce the design patterns, and for this we are going to like explore on the on the on the provider bit. So what are these design patterns? Um, from what I understand, design patterns are the best patterns to solve some problems. They structure things down so that you're able to understand your code first. And also, whenever you encounter a problem, you know like exactly where this is coming from. And they consist of relationships between classes and objects. Also, they speed up development because if you already know, like whenever you encounter a challenge, you already know like this is where I got it from and I can fix it because you know. And also they are independent programs. By this I mean, it's not only, they don't only apply in, let's say for example, Flutter. They apply in other languages as well. If you're using any other language, you need to like have the design patterns are always there, so they can work in any uh, languages or programs. And also they are very flexible, reusable, and maintainable. So what is an MVVM design pattern? So here, an MVVM stands for model, view, and then the view model. So the model here, the model is like it consists of the customer information. For example, the shopping card information, literally everything, the customer information. whatever you sign in, like your credentials and all. Then we have the view. The view is the UI, the user interface. This is where the user interacts with the application directly. So when you want to, like, let's say you want to press a button, you press on the view because it's what you can see on your application. And then we have the view model, which is like a link between the model and the view. But when the view needs to communicate with the model, it has to go through the view model. View model plays a very important role, which is like validating. We'll see that as we continue more. So we have this the hierarchy of the MVVM design hierarchy. So here we have the model, we have the view model, and we have the view where the user is able to see. So for the view, the view and the model can communicate directly, but this is not advisable because as we said earlier, when your application is growing, you're going to get, like, you don't want to mix things up. You want to, like, have like an organized design. You want to have an organized code so that you don't mix things up. This is why we introduced the view model. The view model here uh, communicates. If the view wants to send any data to the model, it has to go through the view model for validation. And also the model here contains a lot of logic that you don't want to expose to the view. That's why we are introducing the view model, which acts like the middleman. And then when the model rather needs to communicate or display something to the view, or vice versa, the view needs to communicate to the model, they go through the view model. um Here, let's say you're having an example of you're pressing a button. So on the view, this is where you have your button that you're pressing. So this event has to go through the view model. So the view model here tells the model, hey, this user has pressed the button, so please update. And then the cycle goes on. All right. As I explained earlier, the model contains the logic part of the application. It contains information such as the customer information that is saved in the cloud or the database. And then the view model ensures that the view and the model do not communicate directly so as to avoid the messy code. View is the application UI that the users interact with. So why is it so important? As I said earlier, the model can communicate directly to the view. But then this is not a good practice. So, but why? Why? Let's um let's see why the reason this is not a good practice. You see, so here we're using this example, a password reset example. So you have this, you are trying to log into maybe your favorite account, let's say it's Instagram, and you have forgotten your password. So you obviously try to reset the password. So here you key in your username, your very amazing name, and then you set your new password, and then you confirm password. This is on the view. This all this information, you do it on the view. But then there is a challenge here. You're trying to map direct the model and the view directly. The challenge confirm password. Ideally, this is not the information that you need to map directly on the model because because it's not the information that you write on the cloud or the database. So what do we do for in order for us to like be able to reset our password nicely and to have everything updated? This is where we introduce another screen, which is the view model. So here with the view model, you are able to map uh, your username and your confirm password. You are literally mapping everything on the view model because this is the point which validates your credentials or whatever you're keying in. And also with the view model, the good thing about the view model is it supplies, it supply and gets data from the view or rather the reset screen. So when data eventually reaches the model or and the database eventually, it is already validated on the client side. The good thing about this is you can add a code to validate values to the view. So by the time they are going to the model class, everything is already validated. And as I said earlier, the confirm password, this is not something that you need to write here on the model because it's not the information that you write on the cloud. And also, it's going to be an issue if you map the model directly to the view because you haven't validated it on the view model. All right. I hope that that one is more clear. So here, as I said, the view model, it gets data from the view password reset screen and supplies the data to the model. So this data is already validated. By the time it reaches the model, it's already validated. Also, another example is here on the view model. Sometimes when you're keying in your new password and the confirm password, you might sometimes write the wrong confirm password. So it's the work of the view model to tell the UI that the passwords do not match, so that when you eventually so that it can validate them on the to send the data now on the model. Otherwise, if your password do not match, it's not going to validate. Um, the model, this, as I said, here you don't map directly your model to your view model because the data the data, especially the confirm password, this is not the data that you will write directly to the database or the cloud. So this marks like the end of my provider and my MVVM structure. It was a very short explanation. I hope it was a bit clear, and I welcome the questions now.
Thank you so much, Kendi, for the presentation and giving much insights about the state management and the MVM architecture. So, for those who just joined, I'm Maureen Josephine, a community organizer for Flutter Kisumu. So,
asking how do you integrate MVVM with the provider and what roles do each sub. So for this session, I didn't prepare like how to integrate the MVVM with the provider. I just wanted to show you like for the MVVM where you separate the logic and the view mostly. And also you're asking, is there a sample code you can refer to us showing the MVVM with the provider? Uh, Currently, no. I haven't prepared the sample code. So what ideally I wanted to do for this session was like give an introduction or rather an insight so that hopefully for the next session I'm going to like do like uh, the code lab. What do stateless? Sorry, Catherine. What do the state classes go into? View model. I'm not quite sure I understand this question. Maybe if you could restructure it.
Thank you so much, Kendi, for the presentation. I think I was speaking, but my mic was off. So this is Maureen, a Flutter organizer for Flutter Kisumu. So I'm sorry about that. My mic was off while I was speaking. So we have like a few questions in the chat. So one question is from Catherine. She's asking, do the state classes go into the view model? So Kendi or anyone in the forum who has a best answer for that can go ahead and provide it.
Maybe, hello everyone. Hello, are you guys getting me?
Yeah, we can.
Oh yeah, sure. So let me try to approach Catherine's question. She's asking, do the state classes go into the view model? My short answer is no. The state classes only hold the states in the user interface so that you can handle the data and changes in state. The view model holds also its own version of the data that has some kind of as in the model itself now holds that data for validation purposes and everything else. So whenever there are changes in the state, maybe you are refreshing the data from the view model or something else. So possibly there is some close relationship, very, very close, as Jacqueline has explained. And I don't think if they mix up, but they do work very closely. Yeah, sure.
Thank you so much, Kerune, for the insight. Do we have any other person with another opinion? In the meantime, Kendi, we have another question from Robert. He's asking, how do you integrate MVVM with the provider and what role does each serve?
Sorry,
Oh
she
yeah, I
already
see.
answered that.
Yeah, I had already answered that, and I see Eric has also sent some links on it. Thank you, Eric.
Hello. So that link, someone from Flutter Kenya community had handled that. I'm implementing MVVM in Flutter, and I'm not sure if he used provider for state management, but I guess at some point he used it. So you can go through it and check it. That's the link to the YouTube session that we had. Thank you.
Actually, he did use provider. It's a perfect example. So thank you, Eric.
You're welcome.
One thing I'll add, just more a comment
Thank
than
you,
anything
Eric,
else.
for that. Do we have any other questions?
More of a comment than a question. The model view model architecture is really important to know.
Pardon,
And to get
Robert.
some,
Am I the only one who didn't get what you said?
Okay. The model view model architecture is extremely important. It's widely used on both Android now and also on iOS. So if you're ever reaching into either of those native platforms, it's important to know this particular architectural pattern. It's great for separating out and making your business logic testable. In that sense, it's a considerable parallel to block that pattern, but slightly different. That's all I had. Good talk, Kendi.
Uh, thank you so much, Robert. It's always like an honor, not like it's always an honor to have you in our meetup because you are always very insightful. Thank you
Yeah,
so
that's a
much for
great
that.
insight and addition, Robert. Yes. So do we have any other questions regarding the state management or MVVM architecture? Seems we don't have any more questions, so I think this will be a great opportunity to know each other, know what we are doing and what we are doing towards Flutter. So let's do this in 10 minutes time before the event is over. So thank you so much, Kendi, for the presentation. So let's start it up with Danvik. Tell us what you do and what you're doing to the community and anything you're doing with Flutter. If at all Danvik can't hear us, let's go to Mark Gichohi. You can tell us briefly what you do and if you are doing any other thing in Flutter that you can let other community members know and share.
Okay, hi guys. I'm Matt Kishohi. I'm a student at the moment. And again, I'm taking Flutter. I'm creating apps. I'm just a beginner in Flutter, not in March.
That's great to know. So feel free to always join our meetups. We have great insights from great communities in Kenya and Flutter Kisumu. So
Okay,
let's go to the next person. I think Robert can give us a brief introduction of him and which Flutter community is involved in and the things he's doing and such as we wind up.
Okay. Hi, I'm Robert Henley. I live just outside the Boston area in Massachusetts in the United States. I'm involved in the local Android community. We don't actually have a local Flutter community, which is odd, although the Android people discuss Flutter a great deal. I've also involved myself peripherally in other groups around the world, such as this one, Flutter Toronto also. And actually, what I'm doing at the moment is not anything with Flutter. I'm studying accessibility. There's an exam coming up next month that I'm hoping to take and get some significant certification. You know, one of only a few thousand people in the world with this level of accessibility certification. So that's where I'm focusing mostly at the moment. And I'll turn it back to you.
Okay, that's great to hear. So that's great to hear so much that you're doing something to do with accessibility. So maybe have you tried out accessibility in Flutter, or is there anything you've done with accessibility in Flutter? In the meantime, we also have, as you prepare to answer that, Robert, Kendi, please, there is a question that from the presentation I had of the separation between models and states, quite commendable. So where do network calls fall? So you'll answer that after Robert gives us information if he has used accessibility in Flutter and such.
The accessibility on Flutter, the story for accessibility on Flutter is quite good, actually. A great deal of it is baked in. The primary thing you need to know and deal with is the semantics object. And what that does is allow you to translate your visual user interface into a textual or spoken user interface that people with screen readers can hear. So when you're thinking about your application, you don't just need to think about the visuals, but also what someone interacting more purely with the information in your app is going to need to hear and type in response. And that's what the semantics object helps you wrap. There's a very, very good presentation from Google I/O 2019 on Flutter for, I think it was Flutter for Anyone, but I might be confusing that with the other talk I'd highly recommend that's also on YouTube from Flutter Europe just this year. That's about a 45-minute presentation, absolutely spectacular discussion of what does and doesn't work. And I'll turn this over to Kendi to talk about models and states.
Okay, thank you. So for where do network calls from? I think network calls is where you fetch data from the internet using the API. So this is I feel like this is a more complex topic also that we need to like discuss in the later session where we show like how to to fetch data using the HTTP. Yes, from the internet. Sorry, the HTTP package where we show like how we're going to like fetch data, from the internet. Or if somebody has a better explanation on this, maybe they can take over.
I'll give a quick comment on that. The view model is in charge of acquiring all the information that needs to be provided to the view. That's its logical place, sitting between the model data and the view itself. However, you don't simply make HTTP calls from your view model. Generally, you separate that out into a different class entirely. Often these are called services or providers. That's a confusing term in the Flutter world, but in Android, they're often called provider classes. But let's call it a service class. The view model is in charge of the view logic. That is, what gets shown, what validation is done to what's shown and what's entered. But behind that, there's deeper business logic. And there are many ways of separating that out. But ultimately, somebody's going to talk to the network. And that's often called a service or the service layer, which the view model will be invoking, possibly via some intermediary like a business use case class. But the network will be called in the service and will asynchronously return data back to the view model, which then notifies the view that it needs to update its state.
I think that's a great insight too. I see we have Wayne Gakuo. Wayne Gakuo, would you please tell us a brief introduction of yourself and anything you're doing with Flutter? Then after Wayne, we'll go to Lincoln, then Eric, as we wind up. So it's just the presentations, because the presentation is over, so we're having a small chat. So Wayne Gakuo, go ahead.
Oh, hi guys. Yeah, it's great to be here. My name is Wayne Gakuo, software engineer, mostly working with the Angular framework. I haven't started out yet in Flutter, but that's why I'm trying to attend some of these events to really try and get to understand how Flutter is, because I'd like to be proficient in both Angular and Flutter. So for me, I would say I'm a beginner, so I'm just trying to understand the architecture, best coding practices for Flutter and all that. Yeah, I'm also an organizer for Angular Kenya community. It's more of a Kenyan community where we hold sessions to really talk about Angular and everything that is there with Angular. So we usually have sessions every week, covering different topics in Angular and having various speakers from across the world. Yeah, it's great to be here. Thank you.
It's great hearing from you. Lincoln Keronei, go ahead.
Hello, everyone.
Hello, you can go ahead.
Hello.
Hello.
Looks like my connection is is cutting off. Let me just see if I can pick up in a moment. Am I clear now?
Yeah, we can hear you. Proceed.
Yeah, sure, we can hear you.
Yeah, sure. So, as my name indicates over there, I do specialize in mobile. Initially, I did some iOS, and then I came to majored in Android. So really, I'm an Android guy. I do a lot of Android stuff. But towards the end of last year, I fell in love with Flutter, and it's really been a good deal. Having done some client jobs on a one-time go where you just do your stuff once and then you deploy it to iOS and then Android, I found it really interesting. So initially, what I did, I started with a course, and then later I landed on a small gig, so that really pushed me up. So something interesting. Robert says he's been dealing with accessibility. So interesting enough, most of the developers really don't consider accessibility stuff, which is core, because at one point, if you ever talk to someone who maybe has issues with their site, you'll really find it that you really have to include them. So I think that's a real good job. I normally advise people to do that, but most of the people do find following into that path where you have to develop. It's almost like doing the stuff twice, but it's about actually just stretching the available APIs, and then that is it. So mostly I do still inject a lot from Android, but I think Flutter is growing up. It's almost in the place. So at the moment, I'm a mentor in what we call Andela Learning Community. We have some sponsorships running for Android developers, cloud, and mobile web specialists. So that's the community that I'm currently very much involved in. So I think that's all for me.
I'll add
Wonderful introduction from you.
Hi, this is Robert again briefly. Thanks so much for talking about accessibility, Lincoln. There was a talk yesterday at 360 and Dev, which discussed all of the things that nobody much tells you before you go building an Android application. It's talking about the complexity of all the things you need to put in to a truly perfect full production application. Things like animation, accessibility, internationalization and localization, all of these pieces. And he went on, this was a lightning talk, but he did more than 24 points about the things you have to remember to add to your app. And honestly, these were as applicable to Flutter as they were to Android. I'll drop a link to his slides in the chat. But the talk on Android complexity was both scary and marvelous, because these are the things people should talk about in boot camps, but don't, in my experience. Anyway, that's it for me.
Yeah, that's so insightful, Robert. So, Eric, could you give us a brief introduction of whatever you're doing? If you can hear us, please go ahead. Looks like Eric is a bit far away, so let's hear
Oh,
this.
hey, I'm back.
Okay, go ahead.
Sorry, I wasn't hearing from your side. So, I'm Eric Muli. I'm a mobile developer and also a web server side using Laravel and a bit of Alexia. Actually, I'm also a student. I'm an engineering student at the University of Nairobi, and I'm also a community lead for organizing for Flutter Developers Kenya. So I really appreciate this session. Actually, I guess this is my first Flutter Kisumu session to attend. And actually, it was a nice presentation from Kendi, and the discussion was a bit fruitful and helpful, actually. I've learned something about accessibilities. I've never even considered those and localization in my Flutter project. But thanks to Robert and is it someone Coronel, yeah, I use his plugin for M-Pesa, and thank you so much for your contribution to the open source. So thank you, Maureen, for the session and those that found time to attend. And yeah, thank you.
Great introduction from you. So great to hear from you, Eric. So let's hear a brief introduction from Roy Matero before we wind up in a few minutes' time. Then Kendi will go ahead and give yeah, go ahead, Roy.
Hello, my name is Roy Matero. I'm a computer science student at Dedan Kimathi University in Nyeri. And I've been doing Flutter for quite some time, maybe 8 months, I think, yeah, 8 months. And I've had a quite good experience with Flutter. I'm also a machine learning and AI developer with TensorFlow, Python. Yeah, that's pretty much it for me.
Nice to hear from you, Roy. Would Harun give us a brief introduction of himself? Then Eric, if you can, Derek, if you can manage. Then finally, Kendi. Yeah, so let's do it that way and keep it short before we wind up. Harun, can you hear us? So if Harun can't, then Kendi, take it over.
Okay. Thank you so much, Maureen. Thank you, everyone who's attended this session. Thank you for being patient, and thank you for your contribution. It's something that I always look up to after every session. The discussion that people have in this community, like we talk about what we are doing. We give more insights on things that we know. We help speakers answer questions. This is always amazing. Thank you so much, Maureen, for organizing this session. I'm looking forward to more of this, and hopefully a code lab to show like how to go about these things, because it's good to introduce uh, a session and then later bring in the code. So I'm really looking forward to that, and also looking forward to learning a lot from you guys. And another thing, also job hunting. If you have any freelance task that you wish to give on Flutter, you can ping me, find me on Twitter, and reach out. Thank you so much, Maureen, and it's always a pleasure and an honor to be here. Thanks.
Great, thanks, Kendi. Great to hear from you and whatever you are sharing with the community. Just before we close it, we have Robert asking Wayne Gakuo if does your group discuss Angular Dart? Wayne Gakuo, if you are able to answer that, you can go ahead.
No. We mostly just talk about Angular in general and TypeScript, and then things to do with RxJS and GRX, like state management in Angular. Yeah, so we also have state management in Angular, but we use some of the libraries like RxJS and NGRX for different purposes. Yeah, but we don't talk about that there. Yeah, but I think it's something we could definitely look into. Thank you very much, Robert, for bringing it up. We'll definitely check it out. Yeah.
It's a bizarre little thing. I know nothing about it except that Google uses it internally.
Oh, wow. This is interesting. Okay. This is something I'll definitely check out. Thank you.
Have fun.
Yeah, so it's wonderful to hear such great communication coming from community members and learning and sharing. So thank you all for attending our meetup. We'll have our next meetup in August. Hope to see you all in the next one. So thank you very much once again for attending, and keep learning and sharing resources and knowledge. Thank you. Bye-bye all.
Thank you, Maureen. Have fun.
Thanks.